Vaughn into the windup in his first offering. Just a bit outside.
Are you crying? Are you crying? There's no crying. There's no crying in baseball.
Little roller up along first. Behind the bag. It gets through Buckner. Here comes Knight and the Mets win it.
Are you okay?
I'm fine. I just threw up in my mouth a little bit.
Purdy takes the snap. He drops straight back. Has some time. Now he scrambles away from one hit. Looks. Uncorks a deep one for the end zone. Phelan is down there. Oh, he got it! He got it! He got it! Touchdown! 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 Boston College! He did it! He did it! Flutie did it!
Well, I believe in the soul. The small of a woman's back, the hanging curveball, high fiber, good scotch, that the novels of Susan Sontag are self-indulgent, overrated crap. I believe Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. I believe there ought to be a constitutional amendment outlawing AstroTurf and the designated hitter. I believe in the sweet spot, softcore pornography, opening your presents Christmas morning rather than Christmas Eve, and I believe in long, slow, deep, soft, wet kisses that last 3 days. Good night.
So then the question is, what do you believe in? Hi, once again, everybody. I'm Ed Berliner. Welcome into the Man in the Arena. Thanks so much for joining us and our special edition of The Sports Reporters. Before we get started, don't forget, once again, you can catch us live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and also on Twitch. Don't forget, all shows are uploaded to YouTube right after the show is done. Just check us out at welcometothearena.com. And also, as an extra added bonus for those of you who just want to listen and not have to look at moving pictures, which happens with age, I know, as it goes along, you can go to 9 of the popular audio podcast platforms, including Google Play Music, iTunes, all the rest. It's all there. Just download. All we ask is that you subscribe, and that's a good way to get things started. Let's go ahead and get on right now, because Monday brings us here on October the 12th a wealth of things to discuss. And for once, finally, I managed to put together a Sports Reporters that is not East Coast-centric, which is the best part of it, because then you get all the thinking process from the middle of the country, and you get it from the West Coast. Which only means that with all of this, I should have had bourbon ready here for the show. But I didn't do that, and I'm going to have to remember that for next time. Let's go ahead and introduce my guest, because I want to make sure bring him on and get to it. My first guest, he is the gentleman who helped to launch the mighty 690 in Southern California. Come on, everybody knows one of the great radio stations of all time. He spent a decade at KTAR, KTAR Radio, also KTVK TV, KTVK TV in Phoenix. Slow down a little, Ed. It's okay. You know these guys. You've been around them before. He was there for a decade now. He is the founder, CEO, host, and also the chief bottle washer, as many of us are for shows that we do OTT and on the internet these days, at sports360az.com. Finally, it's a pleasure to go ahead and welcome Brad Cesmat to the Man in the Arena and the Sports Reporters. Brad, I'm sorry I didn't get the damn TV out in the first shot. I'll do it better next time.
Yeah. Well, because we're West Coast guys, right? Because Dennis and I are West Coast. I've got my green drink here.
Right.
I don't need to have bourbon. We're these West Coast guys.
I only did the water, man.
We're laid back. We're just, hey, let's go golf. And if you win,
you got to understand something.
win.
Brad's just unhappy that he has to do the show.
Grass.
That's why we came up a little late on the live feed today, because he was too busy making his green drink and worrying about his next tea time. We'll get to Mr. Cesmat here in a moment. Let me go ahead and introduce our next guest. He's a veteran sports writer. You've read his stuff at a number of different places, such as the Toronto Sun, MSN. He is co-host on SiriusXM of Off the Rush. He is also the senior writer at The Fourth Period, which means, finally, I get a chance to talk some hockey, which means, of course, Brad won't have anything to talk about because he's one of these, he's one of these Texas guys. It's a pleasure to welcome Dennis Bernstein into the Man in the Arena and the Sports Reporters. How you doing, Dennis?
Doing great, AB. I already love Brad because I had a green drink this morning as well. Yeah. I can't believe it. In a shaker bottle just like him. So you got two hippies on the air with you.
Yeah, I mean, as long as we could figure out how to get the Arizona Coyotes to be relevant and not change general managers and coaches. And if Rick Taka could just hang around here longer than a nanosecond like the 10 previous guys before him, hockey in the desert just might well succeed unless
Okay, well, that'll do it for the show today. We want to thank everybody for joining us.
We're done.
No, okay. Well, look, if hockey's relevant in Tampa, so why not Phoenix? you can only
Very
hope.
busy, very, very busy sports market. Bad ownership right out of the gate. Put the arena on the wrong side of town.
Right.
Everybody's moved to
Bingo.
the Southeast Valley. There's 2 million people moving down here to the Southeast Valley. The new owner, Alex Morello, seems like his heart's in the right place. And then, as Dennis knows, the economy does this, and Alex is built on radio and on entertainment and casinos, and all of a sudden,
yes.
bodies get cut and dumped in the street, and then they fire their general manager. John Chaika's blown out, and then Rick Tockett's like, wait, and Taylor Hall comes in here, and then Taylor's a rent-a-player. I mean, we could go on and on and on this. The days of Gretzky screwing this thing up, and JR was here.
Well, but wait a minute then. Let's go ahead and ask the expert here before we get to a wealth of things that we have to talk about. Let's ask Dennis, who spent 2 weeks in quarantine. He was part of the NHL bubble. He knows the NHL inside and out. So right here at the top, Dennis, give us an over-under on years for the Phoenix Coyotes to make it to the Stanley Cup Finals. We'll wait. You can get your calculator out.
7? Look, they want to trade their best player, Oliver Ekman-Larsson. I think Brad hit the nail on the head. Like, if they could ever get a building on the east side of the valley in Scottsdale or Tempe, it would be so much better for this team. And maybe Alex can find a way to do that. But until they do that point in time, they're not going to be relevant. Like you said, I mean, you can place a football stadium in Glendale because it's once a week. Nobody's driving, and Brad knows this better than me. Nobody's driving from Scottsdale to Glendale on a Tuesday night to watch the Coyotes play the Columbus Blue Jackets. That's the bottom line. Like, so you can, even with a good team, they would struggle. And they have had good teams. They went to a conference final back in 2012. But until they find that formula to get a building in the right place, it's going to be a big challenge for the Coyotes to be relevant in the market where you do have improving teams.
All right, so we'll get to the National Hockey League a little bit later on, but I'm so glad that Brad brought that up. We had to make sure. And I just want to make sure that the people in Phoenix are not going to come after me now with pitchforks. I'm not against hockey in the desert. It's not. It's just, look, I'm being honest. It's going to take some time. Like I keep telling people, because I live in South Florida, they say, when are the Florida Panthers going to get back? I love that franchise. I was there when they were born. But the finals for the Panthers? No.
Now,
Don't expect it soon.
When you have a 1:30 tee time at True North, it's just how it is, Ed. I mean, we're laid back out here, like I said, It's just how it is.
All right, so let's go ahead. We have to go ahead and get the show started because otherwise we'll lose Cesmat because he'll be heading for the tea time here any minute now, right in the middle of the show. Gentlemen, let's start out here right at the top. We have just finished 2 seasons, quote unquote, of 2 of the major professional sports, the NBA and the NHL. They went through the bubble. They've gone through COVID-19. They both played shortened schedules in the regular season, very difficult in the bubble. Is it not fair to say, and I'll be the one right up front to say this to start, I believe every one of these seasons, including Major League Baseball and the National Football League, has to carry an asterisk. I mean, maybe not the NFL at this point, but you would have to think that because of all the players having to be bailed out due to COVID-19 restrictions, and with all the games now having to be changed and all the different setups you have here now and postponements, to me this is the season of the asterisk, especially in the NBA and the NHL. Who's going first?
I think if you just look at where we are in society, where sports, not to get too highbrow on this deal, but sports is meant to be a distraction. And even when sports started to come back, people were like, I got family members that are sick and are dying here. I don't have time to watch or see these guys try to figure out when they're going to play or not play. I know for me, watching the NHL playoffs, for me, here in Arizona was fun. They actually had a little bit of interest, a little bit of excitement to go back on there. The Phoenix Suns on the NBA side, they went undefeated down in the bubble. They were just so god-awful at the beginning of the season. They had no shot to make it into postseason play. But here in Arizona, they're not going to hang an asterisk, Ed, around a team that went 8-0 with Devin Booker. They feel like, all right, this team, which has gone 10 years since they've had a playoff, a game, just a game, for them to go down in the bubble in Orlando, it was a win and it was something good for the community. So, the whole thing about hanging an asterisk, I can see that point, but I look at it and say, these guys still had to go out and bust their humps. I mean, Dennis, you were there in the bubble.
Nobody's saying they didn't go out and play, though, Brad. Nobody's saying that. They played what they were given, but they weren't given an 82-game regular season. They had to have the season cut. Players were in and out. The bubble changed everything. They had to change from training camp to regular season. So to me, this is an asterisk season. You have to.
Dennis, you were there. What'd you think?
Well, I think the asterisk would be MLB. You're changing rules. You're playing a third of the season. There's a guy on second base at the 10th inning to start, right? You're playing 7-inning doubleheaders. That's an asterisk. Don't tell Victor Hedman on the Tampa Bay Lightning his season was an asterisk. He had to come back after 4.5 months. He played a full season and had to play in a bubble. And I was in a bubble. That's a huge sacrifice. I spent 2 weeks in isolation in a hotel room. These players, Ed, he'd roll up on you, hit you over the head if he told you it was an asterisk. I think this was a harder championship to win, not an easier one. Because some teams, if a qualifying team had won, they would have to win 19 games, not 16 games. So no, with respect to the grueling nature of this from a mental standpoint, you can't say it's an asterisk. They didn't change the rules in the NHL. It still was a 60-minute game. You still have to score more goals than the opposition to win.
But it still was fewer games because every record that we have,
fewer games.
But every record is measured against 82-game regular seasons, and you've got records that are being set, hits that are being made, home runs, goals, whatever, that are not in an 82-game season. So you have to make note when you look at history that look at the years, 82 playoffs. Oh, wait a minute, shortened.
Okay.
And then we still don't know what's coming the next season where they may have to shorten again and not go 82.
But I can go back to 2013 when there was a lockout. That was a 48-game season. You want to hang an asterisk on an NHL season? Well, hang on that one, not on this one. They played 70 games, Ed. Right? They came back and under extraordinary circumstances, and they completed a full playoff run. It's actually some teams played more games. And then the end, and to me, the litmus test is who won the finals? Dallas and Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay was a legitimate team to win the Stanley Cup.
Far and away the best team in the NHL, without question.
And Dallas was a legitimate pick to go to the finals. So it wasn't like this convoluted or expanded 24-game playoff gave a red herring and gave you a team that wasn't qualified. The two teams at the end were totally qualified. It was a competitive series. So asterisk, I can't agree with you on that one because I was there. Plus, not only that, with respect to the players that went to the final, right? You got to remember they had some entertainment, but it got so monotonous for the last 4 teams. Because how many times can you go to a golf simulator? How many times can you play pool? Like it was a battle of attrition, not only physically because you saw players get injured, but mentally. The mental part of this, to me, I can't say it's an asterisk at all.
Okay,
I understand your point.
If we're going to take that point, then Brad, let me throw to a point that Dennis made a couple of moments ago. Is it fair to say that at least if you're going to do this, Major League Baseball has to get the asterisk because they have changed the rules in order to be part of this shortened season? And this is not even close to being a real regular season.
Okay, but we'll get into that in a second. I just want to follow up over on the NBA side because I think that's an important part of this discussion. So the NBA at the beginning, everybody was saying, oh, these poor players have to go to Disney World. And, oh, you're going to be stuck at Disney World. You're going to be allowed to go do this and do that. And to Dennis's point, it's the same deal. The two best teams, I can't apologize for the Miami Heat. I can't apologize for the Eastern Conference of the NBA not being nearly as strong as the Western Conference. It ended up working itself out. That was a grind. From the people I talked to that were a part of that, that was a grind for them to be in there day in and day out in that bubble. So both sides, I think it's disrespectful to the players of the NHL and the NBA to say, well, that really wasn't that difficult. We got to hang an asterisk on it. I really do, Dad.
Well, I'm not trying to be disrespectful to the players, but it is what it is. It is what was forced.
When you're changing rules, I think then you can say, okay, these guys had to shoehorn in a season. It's like the NFL where we are right now with games being moved all around. The LA Chargers are being moved week by week. That's the team that is just being
we'll get to that in a moment. That's a disaster on its own.
And so you look at the NFL and you say, you guys have gotten this far, but is the players union going to jump in here and say, we can't keep doing this to our players. We just can't. And that league is one that has to follow what the bubble showed with the NHL and the bubble showed with the NBA, that this can be done. Will it happen next year? I don't know. I think college basketball.
I'm going to address that right now because we weren't going to talk about this, but let's get into it. The bubble concept that we've seen. Can we not agree? You can't do this again. It won't happen because you can't keep fans out of the arenas and the stadiums. You have to have the money. You still have to have that revenue base that comes in. You can't just have 20,000 seats when you've got 100,000 seats to fill. And you can't do this. You can't lock players away for months on end. It's not going to happen again. So now we're looking then at a next season because COVID-19 is going to be with us several months, years, if you will. Where do they go from here? Because you can't bubble again.
Well, I think you could bubble again. The TV contracts will more than make up for the fact that fans cannot be there in full attendance. The Cowboys had 25,000 fans in their stadium yesterday.
Well, the fans stand for it, Brad.
But the fans, look, Ed, the ratings are what they are. People are going to say the ratings are down. There's entirely too much sports on right now. Entirely. Who in God's green earth last night between the Seahawks playing a great game against the Vikings, and then you have the Lakers and the Heat. Who was watching the Rays last night? Who was watching the Astros last night? A tiny number. The Preakness last week had like 2 million. That's usually a 9 or a 10 share. So the numbers, because there's just too much sports on right now trying to make up for lost ground.
Right.
I think the TV numbers, if those contracts can be put in place with their renewals, yeah, fans in the stands is important. Will the fans stand for it? There'll be enough that will. I truly believe that.
I don't think, Ed, and Brad, the players won't sign on for a bubble next year in the NHL. They won't, because the experience was very difficult, and these guys talk to each other. And there were 24 teams in the bubble. It just won't happen. So what I assume will happen in the NHL is that they're targeting January 1st. I think more than likely January 15th, because if you go to a January 1st start, then you have training camp during Christmas week. Which won't happen, right? So you're looking, and they'll start gradually in some places, like in St. Louis and Dallas. You may have play teams in the building. What the issue is, and what the big caveat here is that you have a dual country situation, and that's the reason why the Toronto Blue Jays played in Buffalo. If we still have a 14-day quarantine in January 15th, then you know what happens? You got a Canadian division. And those teams will play each other until the Canadian government waives that 14-day quarantine. So that's a big X factor with respect to the NHL.
It just seems to me that I agree with you on the players, on the NHL players. I don't think the NBA players will stand for it. I mean, certainly we've already learned that the MLB players and the players union there don't want to stand for it. And the NFL Players Association, they'll never go for this, ever, in any way, shape, or form. So then what is that next season going to look like if it even gets started on time? Because look, we expect it, as you said, to be started training camps around Christmas. It's not going to happen. We still have a pandemic in this country. We still have rising numbers in this country. We still have complete COVIDiots everywhere in this country who aren't scared at all about going out and potentially dying or passing it on to their family members. Look, we'll get to the idiot in Florida at Gainesville here in a couple of minutes and talk about that stupidity. But it's not going to change. So in my mind, you're going to see fans are going to say, look, to me, part of the reason I get involved is to go to the games, go to the tailgates, go to the parking lots, whatever, be involved in that. That is a social setting that people say they so desperately need. If you tell people they're not going to get it for another year, I see a lot of people basically saying, look, I did without sports for 4 months. I can do without it again. That, to me, means there's going to be a lot of rebuilding. And that, out of all the four major sports, is going to hurt the National Hockey League more than any of them.
I think there's some of that going on already, guys, where people have said, my life's changed. I've lost my gig. I've lost my retirement. Sports is there for me as entertainment, but and a distraction. But I think there's some people that have already said, I'm going to go a different direction. I've heard a lot of that. I'm curious, though, Dennis, in the space of, and Ed, that if you're saying that the NHL is going to start, let's say, mid-January, and Adam Silver has already indicated the NBA is going to start towards the end of December or into January as well. Are those two leagues willing to go through another summer where the games that are on television are not being rated well because people are still going out and are still traveling and are still getting away from it all? Are they going to say this is the new normal now? Our seasons are going to go January through August or September. We're not going to go head-to-head with the NFL, at least for another year, because it sure seems like that's the direction we're heading.
I think with a condensed schedule and no bye weeks in the NHL, they're ready to play hockey in the summertime. I think they want to limit it to July, though. If they can get it to July, then hopefully for the following season, things are back to normal, and then we're starting in October. I think that's it, because if you would finish in July and start the following season in October, you'd be good. Now, Ed, there are going to be some people, not everybody is scared of this virus, Ed. Like, if you let Laker fans in the building for game 1 next season to celebrate a championship, there'd be 20,000 people at Staples Center. I guarantee it. So it depends. I mean, temperature checks, where are we with a vaccine or, some analgesics or are we going to make more progression? I think at this point in time, it's not 100 or 0, right? I think you have a situation where you have gradually you'll have people in the building. The other issue is that, like here in California, when Gavin Newsom said, hey, no sports until there's a vaccine. Well, are you telling me that every single person in LA is going to take a vaccine?
Yeah, which is not going to happen. You're going to have maybe 30% of the country that won't even. Hey, look, when a vaccine comes out the first time, you probably will have 60% of the people that won't touch it because they're going to be afraid of it when there's a brand new vaccine out there. Look, I know medical professionals who won't take it because they're going to wait around for the second level to come in and find out what happens with the vaccine. So then you've got anywhere from 30, 40, 50, 60% of the people who are not going to be vaccinated. What do you do then? Do you then have to go to the arena and say, as a lot of places are doing now, which are not sports-oriented, you have to have proof of testing within the last 7 days in order to walk in here and get into the arena? That'll never fly with a lot of people. And not only that, but if you test within a week's notice, you can catch it the next day. You're 7 days out, you catch it the next day, and you're still asymptomatic. There's no answer here.
Well, I'll give you my experience in Edmonton. Right, I didn't have to take a test. I had to quarantine. I didn't have to take a test. When I went to the arena, they took my temperature and they asked me if I had any symptoms, and I didn't show any symptoms, so I was allowed in the building. So I think that there's got to be some middle ground here, and I think Brad's right about it. We have to be able to adapt to living with this virus. I don't just think it's all or nothing. The all or nothing approach doesn't fly with me. It's like we got to get back to our lives, and part of it is sports, and we love it, and we got to figure out some formula that would work for everybody. But you're right, Ed, there's some people that it's a non-starter for, and what do you do at that point?
Well, let's move then.
You also look at the different parts of the country. Northern California, on the college end of things, we're getting ready for Pac-12 football to get started. Right. And Cal still has really not gotten out and gotten after it, from my understanding. The same with Stanford. So how equitable is that when you have USC and UCLA over there with Governor Newsom, as Dennis was referring to, seeing it differently? Here in Arizona, guys, we can go out on a Friday night and go to a high school football game. Yeah, they're limiting it to about 2,500 fans. There were 10,000 fans within a 3-mile radius at 2 games the other night. I mean, this place is crazy for getting back out and being active in this state. There's other states, it's completely shut down. And you tell people what's going on here, they're like, there's no way. Yeah,
but then you have other states, and I want to use that to springboard into this, such as the state of Florida, where the governor there has said, open them up. Everything's fine. Don't worry about it. You can go back to normal life. And then you have Dan Mullen, the head coach at the University of Florida, who suffers an embarrassing defeat and has got to find a way to make good on it and get face back. He goes out public and says, I want 90,000 people to pack Florida Field for our game against LSU. Is he screaming nuts? In Florida, which is one of the biggest breeding grounds of COVID-19, he wants to pack 90,000 people in there. Thankfully, the president of the university got right on top of this and said, no. Look, we're still going to limit things. But even to go out and say that is stunningly irresponsible, and it proves once again that you have people like Dan Mullen and others who really don't give a spit about public health or anybody else with COVID-19. You better give me my damn football, and that's all I need. I don't care if I get sick or anybody else gets sick. That's a problem.
Well, we do have the football. It's just that the question of attendance and how do you – I mean, I watched the Texas A&M Florida game last night, and they did look like they did it the right way, and I think that the crowd had an impact on Texas A&M winning that game. So you can do it. You have to be smart about it. You can't just go from 0 to 120. You got to be smart about it.
Okay, now there it is. You really laid it. You put it into the wrong area when it comes to a football coach who's getting paid millions, who just got screwed on national TV with his team that got upset.
But it's beyond that, guys. 2 weeks ago, SMU had all their student section kicked out of the stadium in the second quarter. Well, guess what? SMU said, we want you guys to come to the game. They have this big lawn area in the south end zone, and there's beer being served. Yeah. What college kid is not going to want to go party in the end zone at SMU, where they've had a little bit of success? So I think I understand what you're saying, Ed, about Dan Mullen. I get that. But it's the universities, too, that take a good, long, hard look, encourage the students to come out, and it's COVID breeding ground. That can't happen. That should not happen.
Well, but that's just it. It's the irresponsible nature of this because he's a grown man. He knows better. But because he got beat up, and Florida fans are screaming at him when they get beat up and upset, he's trying to find a way to ameliorate the loss and say, oh, wait a minute, they had a packed house at Texas A&M. No, they didn't. He's making that up as he goes along. So he wants to pack the house against LSU. It just goes to show once again that we have coaches. And I firmly believe it's more college football than any place else because that's where the big money is, and they got to make the big money and keep cashing in, where they want those seats filled with butts, and they've got everybody on top of them saying, we want to be there. And instead of saying, look, guys, we got to back up, we got to take care of everybody, let's pack the field. There was a part of me that knee-jerked, and I hate that said I'd fire the SOB off the top of my head right away. But, you can't do that, of course. I had to back up. I had to back up a little bit and get off the sauce. But
sometimes, though, I think the college football so far, guys, like I'm watching SEC football over the weekend, and you had Alabama and Ole Miss, and they combined for over 100 points. There's no defense. So how much of that is teams not having the opportunity
to practice?
Yeah, right. The practice isn't there. Then you see Clemson in Miami, and you see Trevor Lawrence on full display, and it's like, all right, this actually feels somewhat normal until the high, wide shots go away, and it's just low crowd shots, right? So we know that there aren't fans in attendance, and maybe the Big Ten and the Pac-12 did it right. For as much criticism as both those conferences took, and I get it, but maybe they did it right rather than this shoehorn week on, week off, move games, move this, move that, numbers up, numbers down. And so I think for the rest of the college football season, once the Big Ten gets back in 2 weeks, Pac-12 first week of November, it's actually going to give us a good product if they can get through it all. It's like training camp right now. But Saturdays feel somewhat normal.
Right.
But again, for a national championship, not everybody's playing. It's not going to be a real national championship.
We'll see about Ohio State when they come in. I agree with you on that because who knows if they're going to play the same amount of games. Same thing with the NFL.
Well, let's go ahead then and move to the NFL because that's another bone of contention here because the NFL season, I know we talked about the asterisks here a little bit, but the National Football League has got to admit that they have just handled COVID-19 disastrously, top to bottom, because the way they continue to reschedule games, players test positive, then all of a sudden you have Cam Newton test positive, and then it starts to spread very quietly, and you have to reschedule and cancel and reschedule. You are screwing with the games themselves, and if you want to talk about, Dennis, you talked about players who basically want to play games. Sure, the NFL players want to go out and do it, but if you've constantly got this rescheduling and canceling nonsense, how does that make for a season that's really competitive and then having to sit players out constantly and remove your best players? When Cam Newton's gone, let's face it, the New England Patriots don't exactly have a Tom Brady lookalike sitting there waiting to get out on the field.
Right. Yeah. Well, look at my home team, the Rams. Right. They can't stay on the East Coast. Like they had back-to-back games on the East Coast. They would normally stay there. So they've flown like 12,000 miles already because they've played in Philly, they played in Buffalo, and they played in Washington. Is that going to take a toll the second half of the season? Is it going to hurt with injuries? I mean, that's something that's also has to factor in as well. But yeah, look, when you don't play in a bubble, you're going to have positive tests. It's as simple as that. I don't think anybody's going to get sick or wind up in a hospital because they're all, professional athletes in great shape. But that's the consequence of not going the bubble route. And Brad brought up, I don't see how they can do it, to be honest with you. So they're going to have to deal with this and struggle through and try to complete the season.
I think if you look back when the NFL in March just went about it as business as normal, we went through free agency and then we went through the NFL draft and it just felt like the NFL was saying, we're going to play hell or high water. Right. And then thankfully, mercifully, in my opinion, not having any games in August, because I hate fake football where they're charging fans full price for guys that they're going to get cut, just trying to get the last 5 guys on the roster.
Bravo.
Charge full freight and watch this slop in August that
professional extortion.
It's just the worst of the worst of the worst in all of pro sports. NFL August football is the worst. And if you talk to players away from it, it's like, I'm just trying to not get hurt. Why would you put your most valued employees, your most valued assets out in harm's way for games that don't matter in August every year? And yet they do it because you're right, it's professional extortion. That said, I think the NFL has now run into a situation where they can't buy their way out of this. They can have the smartest people on the face of the planet. And to think that there aren't teams or people associated with teams like the Tennessee Titans, guys, you look at them the last few weeks, it's, well, it's just players. Well, maybe it's somebody off the field that are people hiding what's going on with COVID. I know on the high school and college end, there's been a lot of discussion about that. Parents not wanting it out there, their kids have COVID. Well, how about in the NFL side of things? You can test all day long, but are there false positives? So the NFL can from a PR side, try to hit you over the head as much as often as possible, which they do. But you can't you can't deny what we're seeing here, and that is they simply don't have this under control. And so they're going to try to shoehorn a season. I keep going back to that term, but that's all it is at this point. And so the idea of a team playing 14 games versus 16 games, or a team having to play 3 games in a certain amount of time, and how even and equitable, that's a discussion we'll have to have back in January when this all wraps up, if it even wraps up by January.
Well, again, I think that comes out to that asterisk season idea again, because you have players. Look, Dak Prescott basically having his career cut short in a lot of ways with a disastrous ankle injury. I mean, my goodness, his future going forward with that is going to be difficult in and of itself. But when you look at the players who test positive for COVID, it's because that's not a football-related injury. So then you have losses and wins that are being affected by something that is completely off the field that shouldn't be allowed to affect the play on the field. So at that point, I think that the National Football League has to make a note that, and I'm sure that the Patriots and the Browns and the Rams and other teams are going to note in their media notes and their media guides, which used to exist in real paper years ago, but now as we talk about them and we look back on seasons, they're going to make a note. This game was lost because possibly these players were out. This team played with more players. I mean, they'll make the notes that'll point out as excuses to some people, but they're not really excuses. Because the way the NFL is set, if you don't have your full complement, you're playing from a disadvantage right from the time the first whistle blows.
Well, yeah, the expanded rosters. I mean, your expanded roster size, but I think beyond that, the idea that has picked up steam here in the last week of maybe you should just take a break, a pause for a couple of weeks, and get this all back together. There's some merit to that, but who's to say you're not going to have more COVID cases pop up during it? Look, they've started down this stretch. They got to fight through this stretch. It's not going to be pretty. They're going to get crushed on this by some people on the national space. They will. Yeah. But maybe taking a step and settling this back down and reformulating schedules and all that, so everybody does have an equal playing field, is not the worst thing in the world. Maybe having a league-wide bye for a week or two, I think would be pretty smart here to evaluate where we are, because every situation is different.
Okay, let's go ahead and hit the huge argument that has continued to envelop America here now for weeks, months, years. It always comes down to the greatest of all time arguments, which I honestly, I'm slapping myself a lot of times this happens, because I'm always of the opinion that you cannot rate players in one era against another era. So many things change to call the greatest of all time. That's just me. But here we have the NBA and the argument about Michael Jordan versus LeBron James. Here's the only stat that caught me right away. In NBA Finals, Michael Jordan is 6-0. LeBron James is 4-6. Things change in different seasons. Players change. Rules change. Fouls change. Everything changes. But there are people out there going, tell me why LeBron James is not the greatest of all time, and don't use 6 rings as part of the argument. To me, that's where the argument starts and ends. And I guess where I'm going with this is I don't think it's fair to say that it's got to be one or the other. Jordan was the greatest of his era. LeBron is the greatest of his era. I don't know how you match those eras together and try and come up of all time, because if we're going to go there, we need to go back to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Wilt Chamberlain, Bob Cousy. We got to go back to these players who completely get obliterated in the argument here in 2020.
Ed, Bill Russell's on the other line. He wants to talk to you.
Thank you. No, that's fair. That's fair.
He's the greatest.
Okay.
What's the measurement? He's the greatest. To me, he's the greatest because he won all those.
I take my lumps.
And he had to
exactly
go against
right.
Wilt every championship round. So that's it. Look, I got Jordan over LeBron. Like LeBron is great for his time because of 6-0. Because it's 6-0. Because he's won games when he got out of a sickbed in Utah, made the shots, and he elevated everybody on that team. If you look at that cast of characters around LeBron, around Jordan, and you look at who LeBron had to put himself, Anthony Davis is a great player. The players in Miami he surrounded himself with great players. I think Luke Longley, he won championships. Bill Wennington, he won championships. Tony Kukoc, right? I just look at the cast and what he did and how he elevated and his drive. I just think to me, he's the guy right now. But again, if I had to talk about the greatest of all time in basketball, I'm going with Bill Russell because he's got way too many rings. He's got more rings than both these guys combined.
LeBron won a title with Zydrunas Ilgauskas. Okay. and Jordan never got to a game 7, right? So you look at both of them and say, I put Big Z on my back and we won a title. and the fact that Jordan never got to a game 7, I mean, how amazing is that? I grew up in Southern California when Magic showed up. He made Kareem better. I love watching Magic do his thing through the years. I was very fortunate to be in that space when we started Mighty 690 and all that. It was amazing. And, for where Jordan was and where LeBron is, let's see how LeBron finishes out. Mm-hmm. To have these arguments the day after, it's fine. It's fine. If there's anybody below the age of 35 watching this right now, then they're going to be all over LeBron James. Anybody above 35 is going to be looking at Michael Jordan. I mean, that's pretty simple.
Well, that's to me
People
why
that
the
didn't see
greatest
them
of all
play.
time arguments just don't fit. I mean, they're great for sports talk. Let's face it. It's a staple. I think all three of us know that if you're ever doing, and I did this many times, if you're ever doing a sports talk radio show and the phones aren't lighting up, there's two ways to get them to light up right away. First of all, say Pete Rose doesn't belong in the Hall of Fame. Boom! Phones light up. People go crazy. But the second thing is you take any two players from two different eras and say one of them is the greatest of all time. Boom. Phones go absolutely crazy because people love to argue it. But you can't say of all – I can't think of a sport off the top of my head where you can say of all time because, again, rosters, players, rules – things change in every era. But I got to tell you, Dennis makes a great point. You put Bill Russell in the game today, I think he'd still beat the snot out of 90% of the players in the NBA.
Right.
Although then here comes the argument. Others would come back and say, for his era, he was a light player. He wasn't as big. I mean, some of the guys right now in the NBA are massive. They're hugely muscled players, and the rules have changed. But I just, to me, the whole argument ends. It's Jordan.
Well, and I'll use a space over here where in Phoenix, if John Paxson doesn't hit the shot against the Suns in the summer of '93, and the Suns go on to win that, is Jordan viewed as, well, okay, he didn't win? So it comes down to there were players along the way, as there is with everybody. It's like Dennis said earlier with Anthony Davis, but there were plays that Jordan didn't make, but they still won the championship. Paxson's shot is one of those shots that will live in infamy, right? Like we see Jordan against Craig Elo pump the fist, jump up in the air and do all that. Yeah, that lives there in infamy. The Utah game, whether you believe Last Dance, as some did, or some say, yeah, that didn't really happen in Utah. I don't know. It's still pretty amazing. So
see, to me, here's the better argument. And let's go to you could take this to all of the major sports. But let's take the NBA. Who is the one player that when the game is on the line, with seconds to go, you are going to put the ball in his hand every single time, and you are not going to sweat the fact that you'll win the game? Between the two of them, between LeBron and Michael Jordan, who is it for the two of you?
Well, I get it. I think you go back, Ed. I'm gonna waffle on this, but it's a different game. You were able to push and lean. You were able to do that in the Jordan era. Now, if you blow on somebody, they're down. It's a foul. Right,
And that's
the
fair.
acting, the acting,
The acting,
you know,
right,
the
slopping.
acting is just the flopping, and the acting is been out of control. That's not old guy get off my lawn. That's a fact. The amount of acting, like you guys never have committed a foul in your life. Well, you just got to work the refs. That happens now. That didn't happen as much. It happened. I'm not saying it didn't happen.
No, but
now
the refs
it's
let
a part
them play
of
a
the
very
game.
physical game.
It's a physical game, but I think there's still some finesse. LeBron's game is physical. Jordan's game was physical, but now the star players get protected more than I think in Jordan's era, in my opinion.
I think an argument can be made here too with Dennis on the hockey side, because if you look at how the rules have changed, hockey to me, and I will say it right up front, out of the four major sports, I'm a hockey guy. I'll turn on a bad hockey game any day of the week because I just
watch a lot of Arizona games. You'll see a lot of bad hockey.
Brad, come on.
I knew it. Okay, for everybody watching this in Arizona, that was Brad Cesmat who said that. Don't write me and tell me that I said that, because I'm always the one who gets blamed. But in the NHL, if you look at some of the penalties that are called, come on. I mean, they have gone to the chippy side of the nature in so many things these days. And the players play it very well. The players play it and act much better than they ever did 20, 30 years ago, Dennis. So, I mean, if you're going to look at greatest players of all time, and again, who do you want the puck on the stick of at the last minute? You got to look at the physical nature of the game and what leads up to that. And to me, that too has changed, like every other sport. So it's impossible to say of all time. Gretzky would be an entirely different player.
It is. Gretzky's the greatest of all time. Look
but
at the
he'd be an entirely different player in today's sport with the way penalties are called. He might be better.
He might be better, but you have smaller players who are functioning and doing well. Like Kucherov is not a big guy. Braden Point was one of the leaders for the Conn Smythe. He's not much bigger than me. He's 5'9", 185. So I just the discrepancy between Gretzky and the next highest scorer, and he won championships. I think that's the one argument you can make for that. I agree with you. And with respect to LeBron and Jordan, Brad's right. It's context, right? Like Jordan will hit the shot to win the game. Yeah. LeBron might facilitate. LeBron might make the pass to the open player to win the game. He's not the most clutch shooter in the world, but he's smart. His basketball IQ, he just might make that pass to win you a championship. So that's why it's so subjective, and you can't say. So I agree, but I just think the numbers that Wayne put up, like 215 points, are you kidding me? I mean, we could argue. Well, there is a point. You could argue if Mario Lemieux wasn't injured and had Hodgkins, that maybe he was the more talented, better player. So even in that sport, so I'll take a step back on that, Ed. You're right. Mario Lemieux, some say, was the best player to play at, ever, right? But Gretzky has the numbers, he has the rings. But there you could make an argument, because some people in hockey do believe that Mario was a better player than Wayne.
Different eras make for different great players, and unfortunately, here in the last week or so in baseball, we have had to bid farewell to a lot of great players. But I'll tell you what, when I saw today that Joe Morgan had passed, to me. And I wasn't a Cincinnati fan, but all of a sudden the memories of the Big Red Machine rushed back with Morgan and Johnny Bench and Tony Perez and Pete Rose in his prime and the great players that were there. And it reminded me of a time when, I don't know, again, I'm going to sound like the old man on the lawn here, I guess, but great players who had respect for the game and really played the game with an unbridled passion. And Morgan was a great guy outside of the sport as well when he became a TV broadcaster. He was one of the real nice guys. And
he was really good, too. I mean, on top of nice guy, there's lots of nice guys in broadcasting.
But he was brilliant.
They're not
on the
good,
field.
but he was great. And then, his little twitch, right?
The chicken wing.
Kids grew up with that. Kids grew up in that era.
That's right.
Imitating Joe Morgan.
And everybody asked why that was. And I remember Joe's answer was, there were a number of answers. It was to settle him down, but it was to also be able to keep his bat at a certain level. He did it for a number of reasons, but you don't see anybody doing that anymore. That was so unique, the way he did that.
Yeah, he was the first great little player, and this is how much he meant to the game. I think last year, the Houston Astros, who he started with, actually I think they were called 45s, they put him in their Hall of Fame. So a guy who did nothing for the franchise is now in their Hall of Fame. It tells you the stature of a great athlete who I don't think you can – and we talk about the greatest of all time. Guys, I think this guy was the greatest second baseman ever to play the game.
And if you were to go around the
I think
team,
you'd be hard-pressed to find one, yeah.
You referred to it a little bit earlier, but if you go around that big red machine team where it was George Foster and it was Ken Griffey Jr. and Cesar Geronimo and Tony Perez and Joe Morgan, Dave Concepcion and Pete Rose and Johnny Bench. And I mean, you just go right down. Tom Seaver's on the hill pitching when he was with the Reds. You know, you look at all of that and say, even their role players, that was just a fun team to watch. It was a great collection of players to watch. And they did so many things so well. And the Reds in the day, in the late 70s, if the Reds are playing the Dodgers, the world stopped.
Right.
The world stopped. It was like the A's and Reggie Jackson and like 74, the Dodgers and A's, and then the Reds and the Dodgers. It was just a great time. And yeah, when Joe Morgan passed and Seaver last week, and there's been just so many
Bob
big names.
Gibson,
Whitey Ford, Gibson,
I mean, we look back at these players, and again, it's fair to take that moment and look back. But for whatever reason, and again, it could be the old man on the lawn. I get it. I'll go ahead and take my hit for that. But I see players like that from that era who were so respectful of the game, and they were very different in how they approached the game, and the game was not a business to them. It probably should have been, because a lot of them were taken advantage of in contracts over the years, and a lot of them probably should have made a whole lot more money.
Sure.
But when did that change? When did baseball – because to me that was – and Brad, you're right. Reds and Dodgers, you couldn't miss it.
Yeah.
You couldn't miss those games. I mean, even when the Yankees played the Orioles, couldn't miss the game on the East Coast. You had to see it. Something happened in between those eras, between the big red machine and the machines now of Tampa Bay and Houston and the Dodgers and all those. What changed? I mean,
society changed. It's entitlement. These players have a sense of entitlement. And I think we've all covered all the major sports. Baseball is the worst. The players are the worst to cover. They're so entitled, and it's because of the money. Like, you know, NHL players, like, you need something. Like, I'm friends with the guys here on the Kings. I need an autograph stick for a charity. No problem. I've gone into Dodger, you know, when, like, Garrett Anderson, who was a terrible guy in the clubhouse. Like, and he would infect, like, guys like James Loney and Matt Kemp and say, yeah, you got to talk to the media. I think just the huge sense of entitlement from these players. You know, look at Tampa. And look, I'm a Yankee fan. I'll be totally transparent here. The way Tampa celebrated beating the Yankees in Game 5 and playing the Jay-Z New York song, it was like the Little League. Like, are you kidding me? This is like what you're celebrating? You won a divisional series in 5 games, and you're celebrating like that? I mean, it's just that the sense of entitlement from players at this point because of the money, I think it's not good for them.
But isn't it fair to say that we can't hold the money against players because the money is there and your careers are so short that make as much money as you can, as quickly as you can, because you're going to get screwed sooner or later. Your body's going to give out faster than you think. And if the money's there, is it fair to keep bringing the money into it? I think there's something more to it. I think there's an ego entitlement that goes in there as well, that the money itself, I think we have to take that out of the mix.
If you walk into a Major League Baseball clubhouse or an NBA locker room or an NFL locker room, let's just take baseball for this conversation. So it's 25 different corporations.
Right.
On 25 different islands.
Amen.
And 25 different people that are telling those 25, and in some cases 50 and 100, and you know, if you have 4 or 5 people in their circle, the circles have gotten out of control. I always admire the player in whatever sport. I like talking to high school and college kids as they come along, and I'll ask them, what's your circle like? And that point is, you're not just letting anybody in that's going to tell you, hey, man, you're not getting enough run. You know, we can go back on the Jordan thing. If Jordan had to deal with social media like LeBron's had to deal with social media, how would Jordan have handled all the pressure and all the attention? We simply will never know. But I think when you walk into a locker room now in Major League Baseball, a lot of it is corporation. A lot of it is on island. You have owners, I think we're going to see in the next year or two, some owners walking away from the sport because their main business has been wiped out. That's going to trickle down to within an organization Organizations are going to change. Pressure is going to be more on players, Ed, to your point of hitting the number, of getting the dollar figure. And there simply isn't going to be that space for them, and they're going to get moved on, and they're going to get traded. And I think that's why we celebrate seeing somebody start and finish with the same team in this day and age of professional sports, because it is so rare. They are always going to go chase the next deal. Larry Fitzgerald is one right over here in Arizona. There's not a better guy than Larry Fitzgerald. He's going to go to the Hall of Fame. Every year he signs an extension. Every year it's $11 million. I don't know if he's going to get another $11 million out of the Bidwells for an 18th season or not, but I know this. He is somebody that goes about his business the right way. There's fewer people like that. I don't think it's fair to throw a blanket statement and say all athletes are greedy and all athletes are chasing this. I know some that aren't. But by and large, it is the you have to go out and just be about it for yourself, the 25 player, 25 corporation, 25 island theory. That's what I see.
See, and again, part of this comes down to, and I'm just real quick, go back to the LeBron argument, where people were berating him on social media, where he walked off the court with seconds to go. And I got involved in this conversation. I said, will you people stop? I mean, is this the biggest thing that you have to hammer on? The game was over. There was no chance that they were going to win. So he walked off the court. Big deal. Stop. It's not worth it. It's the incessant hammering that the athletes get, and it's social media that they have to deal with. Look, we have players right now who are talking about the fact that in games, their girlfriends and wives are getting death threats because they didn't perform well in games, and it's all coming through social media. Look, if I'm a professional athlete right now, I'm saying two things. Number one, get every single dime you can as fast as you can, wherever you can. And two, stay off social media and just cut it out of your life completely and stop listening to these knuckleheads, because in many ways, guys, I think the fans have ruined sports more than the players have in many ways. And social media is top and bottom, is the top right away. It's the first thing I think of.
Yeah, I mean, it's how I do business, but it's a sewer. Let's be real. It's awful. And I've had players text me and direct message me on Twitter like, "Am I getting traded?" And I've had wives ask me. I mean, it gets very, very personal, guys. And it's the way we break news. Would I like to put Pandora back in the box? Yeah, I can't. It's not going to happen. It's
Never
just
happens.
If I'm a professional athlete, I'm hiring somebody to manage my social media. And if I have a good if I'm working with a charity or some other organization that needs help, that's what I do. Would I stay on media? No. I've had hockey players tell me I took Twitter off my phone. I'm not checking that out. And if I need anything, I'll text you and you'll know. But yeah, to be on there as a professional athlete, and not only that, even like me, like I went through a situation where the Kings were playing Vancouver, and Vancouver Canucks Twitter is awful. Like it gets personal, it gets demeaning. I told my wife, I'm like, if you want to be on Twitter, like you better watch out, because you might get attacked because I came out and said Vancouver isn't going to beat the Kings or whatever. It's a very, very difficult thing to manage at this point in time. So I couldn't fathom being an athlete. I would just steer clear as much as I can. And like I said, I've had a charity to benefit or something, put a tweet out there. But other than that, I would stay far, far away from social media.
I think one last thought on this on my end, that would be when Dak Prescott went down, he's holding his ankle, and I open up Twitter, and the first few things I see are, oh no, his contract.
Right.
And that just sums it up. That if that's what people are thinking about, rather than the human being, that these guys are just widgets. They're widgets on my Sunday afternoon. They're not playing well on my fantasy football team, so I'm going to tell them that they effing suck. Right. And that happens to these guys all the time.
Well, I'm going to hammer away at a big facet of society here that'll probably want to have me eviscerated for saying this, but a lot of the problems started with fantasy sports, because in many ways now people are treating the players as commodity instead of the players. All three of us came from an era where we watched the players and we loved watching them play. The hits, the shots, the passes, whatever. It was the beauty of watching it. And we couldn't watch every single game all the time because it wasn't always available to us. But fantasy wasn't around. I mean, yeah, guys would bet on games. But now it's, and I think your point's well taken, Brad, there are people out there, and I've seen this on social media today, where there are people bemoaning the fact that Dak Prescott will not be able to play and that will hurt their fantasy team.
Right.
And
the guy was on a cart crying his eyes out.
Right.
His ankle
can the guy
is,
get some space?
He's broken. I mean, he'll never be the same player again either, because it'll take him, a year to come back from this? And because of this, who says he's ever going to have the mobility again to play at a level? And I think he could have played at a better level had he been in any other organization except the Dallas Cowboys. This guy's career is not over, but it certainly has been minimized in many ways now. People don't care.
Well, I did a Zoom earlier today with Danny White, the great Cowboy quarterback. Danny's part of the radio broadcast for the Cowboys.
Great player.
Yeah, and an even better person, Ed. And we were just talking about where Dak was yesterday. Danny was in the stadium doing the game, and Danny's had his fair share of concussions, and he's fought through it. And we see that too with players. I'm sure, Dennis, you see it with players too, the concussion side of it.
Absolutely.
That people don't take that into account. And then you'll get the guy that, I played in my beer league and I'm all that, and this is my outlet on social just to go after somebody and crush them because they have nothing better to do with their life. And it used to be you would call up on a telephone and say this guy was this and this guy was that. Well, now it's turned into, everybody's walking around with this. This is a Lamborghini. Most people don't know how to drive a Lamborghini, but they think they do with this.
Right.
And so
it's ruined us as a society.
And so, it just comes out in all ways, shapes and forms in sports that while we're in a pandemic and people are dying and people are sick and players get hurt, there are still going to be those people that say, I can only live through sports because I got nothing else going on in my life. I got nothing else going on, so I'm going to go after somebody on Twitter because that's going to make me feel complete today. And that's it.
Exactly.
And that's quite frankly why I brought back the sports reporters, because it's time to stop worrying about and doing everything in 140 characters and spitting things out. To me, that's the worst thing in the world. You get involved in Facebook and all these various places where it's a textual argument back and forth. You can't do anything that way. You have to converse, because then you can actually hear the passion in somebody's voice, and you can then hear that certain people can't wait to get back out to the golf course, which you can't always get on text, but that's okay.
I'm ready to go.
I knew he'd laugh at that. That'd be the big one. All right, look, so many things we didn't cover, but there's always a part here at the end of the Sports Reporters that is always usually the best time, where it's a couple of minutes, and this is just the toss-up, because we've hit a lot of things that we all said we'd talk about, and I threw a few things in there, but this is the chance for a couple of minutes, each of you to go off whatever's sitting at the top of your head that we didn't cover or that we did, but it's completely the toss-up at this point. Mr. Bernstein, I go to you first.
Okay, so I'll stick with hockey. Taylor Hall.
Gee, what a shock. I never could have imagined.
Taylor Hall signed a 1-year contract. This is the probably the second highest rated free agent in the marketplace. Signed a $1 million deal to play in Buffalo for $8 million. Right now, he's playing with Jack Eichel. He'll probably blow up next season playing with Jack and get a lot of points, and maybe he stays in Buffalo or maybe he doesn't. But I just think that the COVID pandemic at this point, that's what has happened to the landscape with respect to not just the NHL, but just sports in general about money. His situation was nobody wanted to give him more than 3 to 4 years. The agent went back and said, well, we'll take a 1-year deal. Buffalo offered 8. Colorado offered substantially less, and he had to sign on with Buffalo, not the garden spot of the United States, a team that wasn't in the postseason.
That was Dennis Bernstein, ladies and gentlemen. Everybody in upstate New York.
Oh, I have Sabre fans love me, so it's all good. We have a
It's fair to say.
I
mean, if you're going to he's going to get $8 million for the year. God bless him. But he ain't going to win a Stanley Cup. He's not going to sniff a cup in Buffalo. That's not going to happen for a long time.
He's betting on himself, and it's just, I think it's the reality of the marketplace has sent chills through agents and players who, look, it's the worst year possible to be a free agent, I think, at this point in time. Alex Pietrangelo will probably get the money from somebody, but other than that, they're taking haircuts, they're taking shorter-term deals. So it's just the reality of the marketplace right now.
Okay. Mr. Cesmat, toss-up time. Go for it.
I'm going to talk about Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy's the quarterback at Iowa State. Brock Purdy is going to be an NFL draft pick, probably a first-round pick from what Todd McShay has been reporting and others in the NFL draft. Brock Purdy is one of these guys that has flown under the radar that you guys have heard all about Trevor Lawrence, and that's great. And I'm not saying Brock Purdy is going to be the next Trevor Lawrence. But Brock Purdy is someone that I've covered. I've seen him grow, and this next step for him in the National Football League, pay close attention to this kid. He was somebody that wasn't recruited much out of high school, got into a fight with a cactus during a paintball war. True story. His recruitment his summer year did not go well. By the time he got through his high school season, he'd set records here in Arizona. I was emceeing an event. He came up to me and said, "Mr. Cesmat, what junior college do you think I should be looking at going to?" And I hugged that kid because we need more humble kids rather than stars. Stars mean nothing. Stars mean you got something on a website to get a bunch of clicks. And most times that stars are damaging to kids. Top 100 lists, who are you to say that I can't be on a top 100 list? So Brock put his story out a bit. He went to Boise State, and 6 weeks after that embrace that we had at the National Football Foundation, he's at Nick Saban's house at Alabama. Guys, you can do this. Brock Purdy did it. Any of you watching, you can do it too. It doesn't matter if you're not on a list or not. This guy is going to be an NFL quarterback, and I'm rooting for him at Iowa State.
I like that.
Fantastic.
And I got friends of mine who watch high school sports and watch these kids as they grow through high school and junior college and make the right decisions. That's a good kid. And I'm glad to hear somebody actually give him a pop and get the story out there. All right, let's go ahead and get all the promotional stuff out here right now to make sure that everybody is happy and everybody knows what's going on, because a lot of you are listening via the podcast.
I have green water.
Green water Cesmat there, who's actually trying to be healthy. Let's remind everybody that Brad is the founder and host at sports360az.com, where you can hear his show and you can hear his commentary there on a regular basis. That is 10 a.m. to 12 p.m., noon, Central Time. Is it Central Time or Pacific?
We don't believe in the time change out here, Ed. So
Arizona.
It's Arizona time.
Okay.
Right now, Dennis and I are in the same time. In 2 weeks, we won't be on the same time. We don't know what the term spring forward, fall back. That doesn't exist in Arizona because we're Arizona.
Weird, man. So
time.
Weird. Twitter is at Brad Cesmat. Facebook is Brad Cesmat. And Instagram is at Sports360AZ. Because Brad has great pictures up there. Ooh, gotta look at the pictures. I only put dog pictures up there. I put my pictures of my dogs up there all the time. I got nothing else. It's on the whole COVID system this summer. That's all I got. Dennis, of course, a senior writer for the Fourth Period, because that's why I turn to him when it comes down to hockey many times. Twitter is at Dennis TFP, and the website is thefourthperiod.com. And also, Dennis is heard on Sirius XM on Off the Rush, which, as we speak right now, has got 1 week left to go, but you'll always be popping back in on Sirius XM, right?
Yeah, we'll come back. Probably do about 3 weeks hiatus. There'll be nothing going on in hockey, so we'll probably come back in November and then do a couple of shows, and then hopefully in January.
And make sure you write and say really nice things about the Boston Bruins, and I'll even let you back on the show.
Okay.
And they haven't done anything in free agency, so I'm damn all pissed about it. Gentlemen, hang on when we end the show here, because I want to grab the both of you here for a couple of seconds when we finish up. But I want to thank you very much. We'll do this again, because this is why we do the show. It's just really good opinion from really good sports reporters, veterans, and people that I like and I trust. We'll do it again. Guys, thanks so much. We'll catch you real soon.
Thanks, Ed.
Brad Cesmat and Dennis Bernstein, make sure you listen to, read them, catch them. You'll hear them here again. For Dennis, oh yeah, by the way, before we get out of here, don't forget, you'll find out here in a couple of seconds, and you'll hear in a couple of seconds where to get the show, listen to the show, watch it live, be part of it. Don't forget to like us both on the podcasts and on YouTube. For Dennis Bernstein, for Brad Cesmat, everybody here, I'm Ed Berliner. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody. Rock on, true believers. Until next time, see ya. Be sure to stay connected on social media with questions, comments, conundrums, you name it. It's at Berliner Speaks on Twitter, Facebook, and on Instagram. A great place to talk business and learn a lot more about what we do is simply check us out on LinkedIn. Just go there and search out Ed Berliner. A reminder that every single episode of The Man in the Arena is uploaded to YouTube. Just go to welcometothearena.com, or if you're on YouTube, search out Ed Berliner Media. If you would prefer to listen to The Man in the Arena, every episode is available for download on all the major audio podcast platforms. The Man in the Arena is produced by Entourage Management, LLC, and Entourage Media.